There, everybody. I'm Chris Charbonneau, Associate Publisher for Spin Sheet Magazine, doing another episode of the Spin Sheet Happy Hour. Welcome and thanks for tuning in. With me is Dominic, our brand ambassador from our sponsor, Mount Gay. And Dominic, when was the last time you were on the show?
I'd say maybe like 2 months ago.
It wasn't too long ago, I guess.
I've had to refresh myself on how to do the virtual cocktail setup again. So
yes, looking good. Looking
good.
And you're going to make us the latest Mount Gay drink. What are you making?
So I'm using the Eclipse today, and I was originally going to make a Eclipse and soda or an Eclipse and tonic, which is my go-to with Eclipse, but I decided to take it up a notch and make a daiquiri today, but a variation on daiquiri, and talk a little bit more about the simple syrup that I'm going to use.
Actually, that's awesome. All right.
Let's
do it.
Let's go for it. So most of you are familiar with the Eclipse. It's got the iconic red cap. It's our flagship rum, especially if you're in the sailing world, sailing community. You probably have this, either you're drinking it now or you have this on your back bar on your boat somewhere. This is our 2-year rum. It's made on a tiny island in the Caribbean called Barbados. Little important facts about our rum: we don't add any sugars, we don't add any artificial flavors to our rum. So everything that you taste when you taste our rum is all part of the island. It's part of the DNA and the footprint of Barbados. And in my opinion, that's what makes it really special. So like I mentioned, I shied away from the Eclipse and tonic because that's my 10 a.m. to noon cocktail. And it's way past noon over on the West Coast. So I'm going to make a daiquiri, which is, it's a simple cocktail, but I think oftentimes than not, it's made incorrectly. It should be just 3 ingredients. It should be really good rum, fresh lime juice, and some sort of simple syrup. So I'm pouring 2 ounces of Eclipse into my shaker. You're going to want to shake this up just to kind of get all those ingredients together if you can, if you have the tools around you. You can use a fancy shaker. You can use a cup or 2 cups, put them together, however you want to make it. But it's important to shake it, get that ice aerated, and get, like I said, dilution, and get those ingredients to bind. I'm going to use fresh lime juice. Fresh is always better. I typically always have some citrus kicking around the apartment somewhere. So just 1 lime will do. If you want to measure this out, about 1 ounce of that right into your shaker. And then for my simple syrup, this is really easy to make. You can buy it in the store, but if you have sugar and ideally water in your house, it's just those two, the combination of those 2 things together, bring it to a boil, and you have yourself simple syrup. No need to go out in the store and buy it. But today I decided to make a cinnamon simple syrup, which is essentially just when I bring that simple syrup to a boil, I add some cinnamon sticks to it and give it that cinnamon flavor. Plays off some of the nuances and the characteristics of the rum. Also just kind of changes up your like classic daiquiri, adds a litit bit more flavor, makes it a little more dynamic. I will also say that if you don't like cinnamon for some reason, you want to do something else, if you have some vanilla bean, you can also add vanilla bean instead of cinnamon and make a vanilla bean syrup, same way as you would make the cinnamon simple syrup. So I'm going to do about 1/2 ounce of that. Start there. That's your classic ratio. So 2 ounces of rum, 1 ounce of fresh lime juice, 1/2 ounce of simple. Start there. And if you like your drink sweeter, you can always up the simple. If you like it not as sweet, you can pull back on that simple. So add ice. I'm going to give this a good shake. And then I'm going to strain this into my glass. I'm using this fancy coupe glass, but honestly, whatever glass you have, if you like it on the rocks, that works well too. I like to drink mine neat, however, because I feel like if you shake it right, it's like perfectly diluted. And if you add it to ice, then it'll keep diluting and maybe water it down. But that's just a matter of preference. And there you have it. There's your Eclipse daiquiri.
That looks delicious.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thanks, Dominic. Thank you to Mount Gay Rum. And without Mount Gay, folks, we can't do this. So get out there and drink some Mount Gay Rum. Until next time, Dominic, thanks very much.
See you soon. Enjoy.
All right. All right, folks, we're going to bring on Molly. Molly.
Hey, Sharp. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I hear you started the new year in kind of a special place.
I did. I was in Hawaii with my wife and her family. It was great. It's fantastic. Little jet lag still, but, I'm back.
Yeah. Good. Well, welcome back. We missed you.
Thanks. What are we talking about tonight, Molly?
Well, the idea for tonight was to tell stories about those sailing days that just don't quite go well. And I didn't want to take it completely into disaster stories because we've talked about that before, and we probably will a little bit more as we get closer to the Safety in Sea seminar. I think that's another one that we can always bring back. But I want to talk a little bit more about those days that if you stay in sailing long enough, you can't not have a day where you go, well, that didn't go well. Right. And so we have a great little cast of guests on tonight. We have Kristen Berry from Gale Force Sailing is going to sort of help moderate this and talk a little bit about lessons learned in different disasters, since he's done so much coaching and so much sailing education over the years. And he's a great friend of the Spin Sheet Happy Hour and a returning guest many times over. We have Ray Wolf, who recently had a crew member have quite a harrowing little incident prior to the J105 championships. We have Russ Borman, who's a Spin Sheet Century Club member, who really realized that his girlfriend was something special when his rudder broke. And I kind of want to get to the bottom of that. And then we have Jane Durden, also a many-time guest on the Spin Sheet Happy Hour, and a Spin Sheet Century Club member, who's going to talk a little bit about those times when the wind and waves pick up and you didn't quite anticipate that. So I thought tonight, I know you have to go behind the scenes because we need to answer our listener questions and stuff like that. But I thought let's bring everybody up on the screen and kind of keep them on the screen tonight, because everybody probably has a little something to contribute. I have sort of a pre-organized program, and I have a feeling it's going to take on a life of its own. So we might as well just let it be a cocktail party. And
all right. Well,
here we are under the virtual regatta tent. Hi, KB. Hi, Ray. Hi, Kelly and Russ. Hi, Jane. Welcome, everybody, to the Spin Sheet Happy Hour. Let's start with the most important question. What's everybody drinking?
KB.
Show you how big my Mount Gay bottle is.
It's quite full, Jane. You can tell you've been out of town.
It was a birthday present. I've got to pace myself, but it was a present before the St. Michael's race this year. Most appreciated.
Well, and I was going to do dry January, but then this rolled around. So the heck with that,
I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, we messed that up for you.
What were you thinking?
Yeah. But I'm enjoying a local IPA from here in Florida. I'm down here for the Davis Island J70 series with a lot of Chesapeake and Annapolis-based sailors. So we had a great day on the water today, which, it's Tampa, so this might be the best day of the weekend.
Yeah, cool.
But raced home to jump on this.
Yeah. How about you, Ray? What are you drinking over there?
Basic Mount Gay ginger ale, old standby. Nothing better. No fruit. Definitely no fruit. Don't want to mess it up.
How about you, Kelly and Russ? Where are you?
Well, don't hate us, but we are in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and we just got back from the beach, and I have rum and Diet Coke.
And I have Deep Eddy lemon and soda. That's my drink.
Nice. Cool.
Jane, you have a big bottle of Mount Gay.
I'm not actually drinking
it
it.
with?
So, KB, in your style, I've got a local IPA up here, but I like to keep it sailing style. For anyone who's in Alexandria, this is Fairwinds Brewery in Lawton, and all of their beers are named with things that are appropriate. This is for you, Molly, for tonight. This is Howling Gale to get us into stories.
Yeah, they sound like they should be advertising in Spin Sheet.
They should be. I'll have a chat with them.
Just saying.
I'm going to go off screen and go call them right now.
Good
All
idea.
right, Sharp. Well, cheers to you. Cheers to everybody. Clink, 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 clink.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, Sharp's going to go behind the scenes, and we're going to talk about sailing days that didn't go particularly well. So when he found out that Kristen was going to be on the program, our buddy Wayne Cassidy sent me a note and said, Kristen Berry, he's got a little story about a brooch at Charleston Race Week. And he went over, you did not go overboard, but Wayne went overboard, and about how you brought him back on board and reminded them how much fun they were having before the brooch.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Well, yeah, it's funny. I'm beginning to get a complex, Molly, because, I think the last show we did together was how not to be a jerk. And then this show is the airing of the grievances show. It's like, it's the Festivus miracle here.
That's right.
And, when I read the invitation, I originally thought we were going to talk about how many things I had screwed up today. But no, you want to hear a lifetime of stuff. So,
Oh,
and
really?
that,
You could just tell us about one.
and that story from Wayne is a real was an eye-opening one, and it's fun to laugh about it now. And but it was a pretty serious deal. We went out practicing. We were at Charleston Race Week, and it was howling as it often does at that venue. We had gone up towards the fort, set the spinnaker, and off to the races we went. And we're skipping across the waves. The Velocitex reading into the high teens, which is quite fast for a J70. And our helmsperson, Tom Case, I could see he was beginning to get maybe a little nervous. So we're sailing along. You could see him, and I put my hand on his shoulder. Tom, just steer straight. This big growling puff starts rolling down the water at us, and I said to everybody, hang on, we're gonna plane through this puff. It'll be all right. And the puff came. The boat kind of got on casters almost, started kind of doing something funky, and next thing you know, we wiped out in the most cataclysmic style I've had in maybe forever. And I looked out the back of the boat, and there was Wayne drifting behind the boat. Now, this next part may or may not be true, but as I remember it, he had gone off the leeward side of the boat, kind of ejected on the leeward side of the boat, and he did what you should do. He grabbed onto something, and what he grabbed onto was the spinnaker sheet. So every time the boat would start to stand up and recover, he's holding onto the sheet. The kite would fill. We'd wipe out again. And so I'm hollering back at him, let go of the sheet. And he's looking at me, no, not doing that. No, let go of the sheet. Now, at this point, we're all going to go, careening into the Folly Beach
Fort
beach
Sumter.
over there. Yeah, exactly. And, I showed him the knife. This is the next step. We got the kite down, we got it assembled, and got the crew member back on board. And as any coach does, you got to turn lemons into lemonade. And I said, well, let's go upwind and do it again. Let's try that again. But it was scary, and because of that, and because it's the beginning of the season, at least for those of us who are on the travel circuit, I do think it's important to use that as a lesson, which is you ought to practice a crew overboard with your racing team and your cruising team on the regular. We did one here. I'm sailing with Taz Coffey and Casey Firth and Mary Beth Parkerson here. It's an all Annapolis-based crew. And the first thing we did yesterday in our practice session was practice an upwind crew overboard and a downwind spinnaker up crew overboard. Beginning of the season, let's just make sure that everybody knows how to do it. And that's something I recommend for everybody is to, know what you're going to do next when somebody happens to go overboard. And that way, when you lose your Mount Gay hat and you need to go back and fetch it, you can do so safely, swiftly, and in style.
Hey, KB, can I ask you, did you throw a real person over, or do you use something else to go off and go and get it?
Well, when I'm doing crew overboard training with teams, I've got 5 teams that are preparing to do the 2024 Round the World Arc. And with those teams, we often put somebody in the water because getting back to the victim is only half the battle. Getting somebody back on board and the uniqueness of your vessel and what it takes to do that is a big part of it. So we put a person in the water for that. But for our training here, we selected a crew member who fell overboard, so he or she couldn't participate in the drill, but it was a cushion that went in the water.
No, I think your point is exactly it. We were staggered at actually how hard it was to get someone back on the boat.
Oh, yeah. And when you're in the water, I bet a J70 looks a little bigger.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it out yet, but I'm just guessing that suddenly,
Well, and the other thing is that, and I work with U.S. Naval Academy, and we coach crew overboard a lot there as part of the fundamental training that we do. And one of the things that is not a pass, at least when I'm administering the test, is if you get back to the victim in the water with too much speed, the boat needs to be stopped. I, for better or worse, weigh 225 pounds. And if one of you tried to gather me out of the water and we're sailing along at a knot and a half, I would at the very least probably dislocate your shoulder and more likely would probably pull you in the water with me. So it's really important to be able to get the boat stopped next to the victim and then carry on with whatever you're going to do next.
Can we debrief just a little bit on broaches in general? I mean, who on this call has broached, who's been involved in a broach before?
45 minutes ago, we did one. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Like what you can learn from doing that from prevention to what to do when they happen, KB, from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, and certainly as somebody who's a sailing educator, first and foremost, you should practice broaches. Those shouldn't be a surprise. You should go out and, grab the oldest spinnaker you got and go out there. A broach, for anybody who's watching who doesn't know, is when the boat is overpowered or out of balance to the point that it begins to turn on its own and stalls out. The keel stalls, the boat heels over, and it seems scarier than it is. And certainly with current or modern boats, asymmetrical spinnaker boats, it's usually a fairly non-affair. Symmetrical spinnaker boats or boats that were had a tendency to gripe or bear away, the broach could be a little more spectacular. But for the most part, in a asymmetrical spinnaker boat, when you're sailing downwind, the puff hits, the kite doesn't get eased enough, or the crew weight doesn't go to windward enough, or the helmsperson doesn't bear away enough, and the boat sort of trips over its keel, and it pivots and rounds up. And it's noisy, and it can be a little bit scary. But if you've practiced it, if you've intentionally gone out and broached, then it becomes a non-affair as well. You know how to recover from that. And the mnemonic of when in doubt, let it out very rarely fails in sailing. And so if you're about to broach, start easing the sheet and you may be able to recover from it. So.
Yeah. And just for our listeners out there, feel free to post a question anytime, even if it's on a topic that we're not on yet, because we'll get to it. Go ahead and post it, and Sharb will keep his eye on the comments. So for any other comments anyone wants to make on broaches before we move on to our next
One thing that's fascinating is some people have been, if you've been through it, you've been through it. And other people, we were doing Wednesday night and it was really windy, and we just did a spectacular broach. I mean, and I won't name the name of the boat, but the pole didn't trip, and the boat turns and the boat didn't trip. So the spinnaker just said, okay, I'm going to take the boat mast this way and the boat that way. And after we broached, in the middle of it, you kind of assess, okay, who is hunkering down and hasn't done it before and isn't useful? Is everybody okay? And then you just almost take a deep breath and you're like, as long as there's not a boom that's going to come crashing down and just still up in the air, you kind of hang tight and you're like, okay, what's next? And you just take a deep breath, because it's not, if you've been through it enough, or you've just had some ones that were just horrendous, typically you just say, okay, take a deep breath. Okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the action plan. And too many, if you don't recognize who is kind of like, I don't want to say disabled, but completely shell-shocked, then you don't know what your assets are. We have one individual, big burly person, real tough dude, and we wiped out, and this person was cowering in the bottom of the cockpit going, and I knew I wasn't going to task that person with anything, because they would just be like Kristen said, oh, grabbing onto the spinnaker sheet. No, don't do that. Oh, let me just open up everything. But no, don't do that either. So
and then you have that other crew member who's like, yeehaw!
Yeah, that's usually me going, all right, here we go. That's kind of cool. All right, let's get going. And it's not
Molly, I have one other broach story that's worth sharing. So Key West Race Week 2014, J70 class has a huge showing there, maybe 60 or 70 boats. Spectacular. And Key West is a windy venue. We happen to be having a really good race. We came around the top mark in about 6th place, with the lead pack of the first 4 boats being maybe 200 yards in front of us. They were pretty far down the track. And the trailing boat in that lead pack, their spinnaker halyard opened up. that we used to use a snap shackle. So the halyard opened up and the kite started to fall down. Now it doesn't fall straight down, the air is flowing through it, so it takes a little while to get there. This team had the presence of mind to do something amazing. At that time, we hadn't figured out that you sail with the jib out. So they unfurled the jib, sheeted on the main, and the helmsperson threw the helm over and intentionally broached the boat. And they heeled over far enough that their forward crew member was able to scurry up the mast because it's leaning on its side keel almost out of the water. Scurry up the mast, grab the spinnaker halyard. The boat stood up as they eased the halyard out. They gathered the kite, connected the halyard, and had it rehoisted and were sailing again before we could catch them. And I said to my team, I was like, well, there are some teams here that we're not going to beat. But obviously they had practiced that and they had considered that option, I'm sure in some other class. So to them, a broach wasn't scary and everybody knew what to do when in that case, they intentionally did it. So it's something worth putting in your playbook. I tell all of my clients that we want to expand your range of sailing. And I don't mean that geographically, I mean that in the wind range. So if you get spooked off the water at 15 knots or Chesapeake 20, and you turn on the engine at 5 knots, well, you should use this season to try to extend your range. Sail in windier conditions in a controlled way, and in lighter conditions, learn how to sail your boat efficiently so you don't have to turn on the motor. And I think, these are good times of the year to be thinking about that stuff.
And for anyone who is just joining, we are talking about rough sailing days, not necessarily disastrous sailing days, but rough sailing days that are memorable and sometimes a funny story later and some of the things we learned from them. And KB, Kristen Berry, is the owner of Gale Force Sailing and a longtime sailing coach and you've been on the Spin Sheet Happy Hour at least 3 or 4 times. So thanks for coming back.
And uniquely qualified to be on this episode because I've screwed so many things up.
No, because we know if we have nothing to talk about, that you can fill an hour.
True.
And we will laugh and have some fun. All right. So I'm going to bring it on over to Kelly and Russ. When I put the call out to Spin Sheet Century Club members, asking if they had any salty tales to tell, Russ was one of the first people who responded, and he told us a little something about breaking a rudder one day. But before you get started with that, Russ, would you introduce yourself and just tell the viewers, anyone who doesn't know you, how long you've been sailing, what kind of boat you sail, just a little 1-minute intro to yourself, and that means you too, Kelly. So we know who everybody is, and we're going to get Ray and Jane to do the same when we get to them. But we're going to start with you guys.
Sure. I'm Russ Borman. This is Kelly Smith. We met almost, 2.5 years ago. I've been sailing since, this is my 12th year. I learned to sail late in life, whereas Kelly's been sailing for a much longer time. We call Annapolis home during the summer, but when the temperatures drop, we head south, and so that's where we are right now. We're in Florida. We're in Fort Lauderdale, to be specific, on our Hunter 420. But our story begins on my previous boat, which was an S2, a 1985 S2, 36-foot center cockpit sloop. Go ahead and you tell a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I've been sailing since I was a child, basically. I was a cruiser throughout the 80s, all over the Caribbean. And then I got into racing later in life. But it was cruising boat racing on Lake Travis in Austin, Texas.
Wow.
And Russ and I met on Sailing Singles because we were both looking for a sailor during COVID times, a sailing partner. And that's how we met. And this was one of our first dates. The first date, he actually came to Texas, to Austin, and stayed in my apartment, or stayed on my boat, and I stayed in my apartment. And then the next date was St. Michael's,
Yeah.
and then I think we did this date from Georgetown.
Yeah, Myrtle Beach.
So it was only our third date. That's what I called it anyway. He might have thought it was a lot more than that, but.
Do you want us to go ahead and launch into the story, Molly?
Yeah, tell us about your rudder day. Rough rudder day.
Well, Kelly had, as she said, flown to South Carolina. I was on my 5th trip south on my older boat, previous boat, and she had flown into Myrtle Beach, and our intention was to sail together all the way down to Charleston. And at that point, Kelly was going to get on a plane and fly back. But as she said, we met on Sailing Singles because we had both decided that we just needed to find a compatible partner who was first and foremost a sailor. And so we figured, well, the best way for us to determine how compatible we are is to go sailing, right? So the first day was uneventful. Kelly boarded the boat in Myrtle Beach. We didn't do much sailing that day. We motored down to Georgetown. I don't know if you're familiar with the geography in South Carolina, but it's about 45-mile trip. The next day was when things got interesting, shall we say.
Very interesting.
So we had left the dock in Georgetown on our way to Charleston, and we got out into the middle of what's called Winyah Bay. It was a pretty nice sailing day, wasn't it? What were the winds? Would you say, like 15, 17
it was
knots?
Beautiful.
And Kelly was at the helm, and I was on the sails. They had just gotten the main raised and the jib out, and I said to Kelly, "Okay, take her off the wind." And
I just started turning.
and I said, "Take her off the wind." She says, "I'm trying." And I'm thinking, well, I know this boat pretty well. It's usually there's enough power for us to get off the wind. And so I started trying to figure out what was going on. I said, "Okay, turn her hard over to starboard." And I guess you had the helm all the way over, right?
Oh, yeah.
And nothing was happening. So I'm scratching my head. I jumped down below and opened up the steering compartment and looked at the quadrant, and I yelled up, "Okay, turn the wheel." And so she's turning the wheel, and the quadrant's moving back and forth, and I'm trying to figure out, well, why isn't the boat moving? Why isn't it going the direction we want it to go? So I scampered up on deck and climbed down the swim ladder on the transom, and I yelled over to Kelly, "Okay, turn the wheel."
I did.
She's turning the wheel, and I said, "Turn the wheel." And I'm looking over where the rudder was supposed to be, and there was no rudder. Somehow the rudder had just completely fallen off, and the only thing left was the rudder post. So we figured out that we weren't going to be going to Charleston that day.
No.
And of course, when something goes wrong, it's not a matter of, oh, who screwed up or what happened. It's a matter of, okay, react, adjust, and move forward, right? And so the first thing we did was drop the sails. We dropped the main and furled in the jib, and luckily, the boat wasn't in any peril of running aground or anything. And also, I'm very fortunate to have been a member of Boat US and called Towboat. And within 45 minutes, they came out and they hooked us up and brought us back to the marina. And it was at that point when we got the boat tied up that I actually got into the water and realized that there was just absolutely no rudder left. And for those of you who have never gotten up close and personal with your rudder, it's really nothing more in most cases than a piece of foam that is attached to a stainless steel post. And it's got these little arms that inside the foam that literally turn the rudder from port to starboard and so forth. And none of that was there. The only thing that was left was the post. So we figured that the arms had corroded over time. And keep in mind, this was a 35-year-old boat, more than 35-year-old boat. So we figured that it had never been swapped out, never been maintained very well. And I'd only owned the boat for, 6 years at that time. So long story short, we needed to get the rudder replaced. But I turned to Kelly and I said, I feel so bad. You flew all the way to South Carolina to come sailing with me, and now we can't go sailing. And she turned to me and said,
It's a boat.
it's a boat. And that's when I knew she was the one.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky you were within range of towboat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we
You know,
had
did
our
you have
motor-
a plan for an offshore rudder?
Well, of course, we had a emergency tiller, but when you have no rudder, emergency tiller isn't going to help you at all. So Plan B would have been to just drop the anchor, and then gradually try to tack our way back up to the dock where we had just left. We were, I would say, less than 2 miles from the dock we had just departed. And Plan C would have been to just drop the dinghy in the water and tow ourselves back.
Yeah.
So, again, the important thing when something goes wrong is
Don't panic.
is exactly, don't panic. Just respond and adapt and figure out what you're going to do next without panicking. And luckily for both of us, neither of us panicked. It was a surprisingly calm situation, and I think that was another reason that we both realized that we were going to be really good compatible sailors, because neither of us panicked. There was no, what the heck did you do or anything like that. It was all business-like. Okay, let's just figure out how to get ourselves safely back to the dock and then figure out what to do about the boat. That boat, by the way, I did buy a new rudder and had it installed, and that was just a little over 2 years ago. We bought this boat in February of 2021. So we're coming up on 2 years now of sailing together full time. Kelly and I decided to be full-time cruisers in February of 2021, and then in March we bought this boat in February, and in March Kelly moved aboard, and we've been cruising ever since.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you, KB. Do you have any wisdom to share on broken rudders? I know that really varies depending on the type of boat and the sailing situation and how close you are to land and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to go through a full safety at sea lesson about emergency steering. But I just wondered if you have any stories or any wisdom there.
Well, figuring out how to steer your boat using things other than the rudder is a great thing to practice. And we do that as racing sailors. Cruising sailors should do the same. And there are many, many sort of levels of escalating intensity for how to make that work. And every boat is a little bit different. Some people can steer their boat with a drogue off the back of the boat and position it. And other boats won't react very well to that. Interestingly enough, in a Chesapeake connection, Will Keyworth's brother, who used to run a marina up in Rhode Island, has an incredible series of videos online about how he learned to steer his, I think it's a Swan 36 or a Swan 42 or something, with no rudder. He actually took the rudder out of the boat to go test this. And that's good. That's good winter watching, in my opinion. But learning to steer with less rudder is something all sailors should work on.
Yeah.
But KB, if your story was about how good foredeck and mast people were, I think your story, Russ, is about, and Kelly, is about how important it is to know how to use your sails. Yeah, really good. Because I heard you saying that you were using your sails to then be able to turn the boat. We do that in our race team, and we'll get told, I'm on the helm, and I get told hands off, and the rest of the boat have to steer the boat using the sail. Russ, your story though, Molly, is making me laugh about our Valentine's thing last year. My boyfriend is also a sailor. It's very important to find one. And the first time he ever professed his feelings were when we were in a little tight situation in his Inland 20. And I said, I got it, and brought it in kind of Captain Ron style. straight into a dock and dropped the things, and he just sat there going, damn. Love and sailing and sort of vague catastrophes. The good combination. I
was thinking with Kelly and Russ. Now you have a future of jokes about rudderlessness ahead of you. You know, so
it's awesome.
And many other things.
Yeah.
Let's let Ray tell his rather harrowing tale. But before you do, Ray, and I should have done this at the beginning of the show, but tonight I just sort of let it flow like a regatta tent party. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the sailing that you do? I know you as a longtime racing sailor. I don't know if you've even ever done any cruising. So if you just tell us a little bit about your sailing background, the kind of sailing you do today, and then you can tell us about your rough crew incident.
Oh, thanks, Molly. I appreciate it. I've been sailing my whole life. I started when I was 11, when I think my dad just wanted to get myself and my two sisters out of the house to give my mom a break. I've raced everything from like a laser to a Volvo 70. So when you, KB, when you're talking about the man overboard drill on a Volvo 70 for the Bermuda race, we threw somebody overboard. It's just kind of like you can't fake it because you're looking at when the person's overboard. It's like, wow, that boat's big and it's high. So, and my latest project is a J105. We have 34 boats in the fleet now. Yeah, I see Molly's even with the light glare. I see Molly's eyebrows go, wow, that's a lot. So
it's impressive for a J105. They're not new.
No, they're not new. They're not new. So getting ready for the North American, was it the North American? No, it's the Bay Champs this year. And we're doing a practice the day before the regatta. And our bowman, Nick, God bless him, great kid. And I say that kid, he's like 30 and I'm much older than that. So he's not a kid. Our normal procedure is he's on the bow and he grabs the foot of the kite and goes down the forward hatch with it. And our masked person takes down the rest of the kite and throws it at him. Well, the kite was about, 90% down, and our masked person, whose name will remain, anonymous, thought Nick was clear of the hatch, and he proceeded to close the hatch and stand on it and stomp on it. Well, Nick's hand was in the hatch, in the back part of it, so the boat that we're practicing against could hear the blood-curdling scream from Nick as it happened. I know.
My hand hurts.
Jane's looking at this going, oh. So then our masked person figured out what happened, opened the hatch, and Nick, our bow person, comes running through the boat all the way up. And first thing he said was, where's my cigarettes? And he goes, you need a new bow person. And I look at his hand, and his hand is kind of, these three fingers are just absolutely going that way. And it was a gore fest. I mean, it was pretty bad. I mean, every time he took a puff of the cigarette, more blood was shooting out of his hand. And we're like, Nick, we got to do something about this. So I know
you needed more Mount Gay rum.
Oh, you know what?
Everybody just pause and take a sip.
Everybody pause, take a sip. There you go.
This is like a drinking game now.
You have the previews now. You have the. So at that point, we're like, okay, well, we've got to just. First things first, just wrap up his hand and see what we have. And our lessons learned from it was, okay, one person take care of Nick, one person drive the boat, and the rest of the people put the boat away. Because we were in the Severn River. We weren't far. The fastest thing for us to do was get him to the dock and take him right to the hospital. It wasn't, by the time we called an ambulance, we would have had him to the hospital already. And he wasn't shocky. He was very, but the real lessons learned that we had was our first aid kit wasn't even close to what we needed. It really did not come past muster. And Nick was a champ about it. He was fantastic. But looking back, I'm going to recommend everybody who's watching this and everybody on this broadcast. One thing, instead of just buying a first aid kit, everybody knows a nurse or everybody knows someone in the medical field. Go to All Tackle, who do advertise in Spin Sheet's Sisters and Brethren magazines. Buy a fishing tackle box, and then with that fishing tackle box, go fill it with things that your nurse or doctor friend or what you think you need, because most of those kits do not even come close to what you would need. It was eye watering. I mean, sail tape and a sock did a better job than anything we found in the first aid kit.
Did anyone strip their shirt off? Or I mean, how did that work?
Well, no, I mean, we literally took a sock and put a sock over his hand and then wrapped it, because that was just there was no Band-Aid or gauze that was going to stop things, and it was. I think the best part about it was nobody panicked, and when we said you focus, I'll focus on Nick, you drive, you guys pack up the boat as we're doing this. And then have dock lines, and okay, let's coordinate who's going to go to the hospital with him. How are we going to do X, Y, and Z? And I felt really bad because we did have to find another person for him for that regatta. I mean, there's the very next day, so we just did that was just a mess. That happened this past fall, and to his credit, I mean, he came down to the dock the next day with a club pretty much on his hand and just wishing us on our merry way. And he was really bummed he couldn't come out. But yeah, lesson learned. Man, first aid kits are a thing. And
Yes.
I do a lot of race committee stuff as well. And we'll always figure out, we have plans of where we can meet ambulances and who to call in, what the protocol is, and who does what, so there isn't any confusion. I do like the story about the broken rudder. I can't top that. Thank you, Craig, noting that. It's finding out who the medic is. That was one thing on the Volvo 70, the Bermuda race. We had a person who, great guy, amazing sailor, for some reason had unbelievable seasickness to the point that he was incapacitated. Same type of thing. Make sure that you have a medic on board. For the broken rudder thing, I'm glad I wasn't there. Kristen, I don't want to sail with you after all the things that I'm hearing what's going on. I mean, we've got practice broaching, people falling overboard, and I'm trying to think if you can start a fire. I mean, that's a thermal event on
much
boat.
more bloody, Ray. You've just gone all the way there with the blood. So
Oh yeah. Oh,
Well, I have to. I do have to toot Ray's horn just a little bit. And first of all, his J105 is called Patriot, to answer your question. Thank you, Prague, for your comment. I love that comment. But to Ray's credit, he won. He won the Chesapeake Bay Championships with his substitute
Congratulations.
comment. So
Good job.
Ray.
Cheers.
So,
Everybody have a drink. Social.
yeah, okay, let's just applause
Social for you.
to Ray's team for rallying, and but thank you so much for that. That's a really valuable, constructive thing that people can do in the winter season too, because so many of them are not sailing right now. So get first aid.
Molly, I was going to say exactly what you're talking about. One, Ray, I think you're exactly right. I think having an established station bill where everybody goes when there is a moment of extremis of some kind makes sense. And so the medical side of things, somebody's got to sail the boat or get you to where you're going, and somebody's got to deal with the patient. And that should be pre-assigned, not try to be figured out on the fly.
Yeah.
The second part is that first aid kits get depleted one Band-Aid at a time. And so if you start the beginning of the season thinking that your first aid kit is just right, you come to find out that somebody's been stealing aspirin or using a Band-Aid and you don't have what you need. So it's one of those things to check, certainly as an annual preventative maintenance kind of thing, but on the regular. And I have one brief story to share with you. I was sailing from Bermuda to Maine this past year with the 59 North crew, and we had an injury.
Is this another don't sail with Kristen Berry story? Okay, just go ahead.
I'm sure I'm getting no business out of this call. That's for sure. But we did have an injury, right? And somebody got hurt, and we went into our action plan, and it was a head injury, so it was bleeding pretty significantly. And Emma, my co-captain, was dealing with the patient, and I was providing the materials out of the med kit. And so we have these big offshore, med kit things. And I open up the kit looking for the gauze package. And the first thing that's sitting on top was the body bag. And so I pulled that out. I'm like, that should be on the bottom of the med kit, not on the top. That's the last thing we should be doing. Yeah, that should be on the bottom. So anyway, stack your med kit appropriately or you may freak your patient out.
Band-aids on top, whatever on the bottom.
It might be time to have a spin sheet happy hour just about medical emergencies again. It's been a while since we've done that, so that's always a good one to bring back. There are only so many things to talk about on this program, right? And might as well just keep the good ones coming. So,
no, Kristen's got hundreds of them. These are just amazing. I mean,
well,
and trailering issues. Do you have any of those? I'm sure. No.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, this program could go on for hours, but it's only supposed to be 1 hour. So it's time to let Jane tell us a little bit about some of her tales. Jane, why don't you tell us how long you've been sailing, sort of a variety of boats you've sailed on, what kind of sailing you're doing right now, because you're doing a lot of sailing right now.
Yeah.
And you're Captain Jane now, by the way. Congratulations. So,
thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I think Daddy deserves a drink.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Daddy deserves a drink. Congratulations.
So I've been sailing since I was about 7. I was gifted a boat from my aunt that was in complete disarray, and that turned into not being able to get me off the water. So I've kind of like you, Ray, sailed dinghies. I sailed a Mirror and a Moth when I was a kid, all the way up. And I now sort of straddle this line of I race, but I'm a cruiser racer on my Beneteau. And I cruise. And last September, just before the boat show, when my job was downsized away from me, I stepped into really maximizing my sailing. So I decided to take it as an opportunity to really do a lot of what I'd been doing on the sidelines beforehand. So I coach and train a lot of women sailors,
Awesome.
Kelly, who are not like you. A lot of couples tend to be where women haven't had as much experience and they've got a boat. And so I work a lot with couples. I do a lot of couples training on boats, and a lot of work with couples that have bought boats and have done the formal lessons and are now sitting in the boat in Annapolis going, oh, now what do we do? So I've done deliveries. I've done this terrific last month. I spent about 6 weeks all up with a great couple that have a Vision 444. Met them at the boat show when I was doing a delivery, and it's a very pointy boat, and it was very pointily pointing at the boat I was trying to put in. And the process of spinning that, the owners said, do you want to come sailing with us? And so I've actually just spent the time I went from Edgewater to Bermuda, flew home for Thanksgiving, and then Bermuda to Antigua with this couple. And for all intents and purposes, I was crew, but I was really brought on as a really interesting coach. Yes, sailing coach, but more they were looking at what I used to do in my day job, which was more around process management. How do we figure out as a couple how to get this boat from here to here and to not kill each other and to still love each other? And so it's part just observation of how people work. It's how they get along. It's how they communicate. It's absolutely how they sail, but
just a little couples therapy. Just
a little bit, just a little bit, quite a little bit, lots and lots of communication and looking at communication style, but really also looking at a lot of stuff that I think that not everyone in a couple often realizes makes the boat go. Who's responsible for the documents? Who's checking you in? Who's provisioning? Who actually knows how to turn the stove on? As it turned out in this couple, he knew how to turn the stove on, but we would have been eating very different things had he not been around. And so we did 2 terrific long trips, and most of those trips were smooth sailing. Anyone who's been from here to Bermuda knows there'll be at least a day that's pretty crappy, and we had a pretty crappy day out from Bermuda, but all was good. We lost our AIS. That was pretty fun. But it was the trip from Bermuda to Antigua that was the fun one. We'd come down, and like everybody else, from Annapolis to Bermuda, we were with the whole sort of, all the salty dogs, and everybody else was going south, and everybody had watched the weather systems come through. And Chris Parker was advising everybody to go down to Beaufort and not do it. But we were going east. We made it east and did just great. And I came back and it looked like the weather systems had come down. But we were definitely trying to outrun another system that was coming down. And Chris Parker's advice was, if you can go fast enough, you'll be fine. So we were on one of those trips. And about 5 days out, we'd actually been pushing it. It had to motor sail to get through. And I was sitting up, we had 4 of us. So we were taking single watches, just 2 hours, which was great. And I came onto my watch and was briefed on by the owner. And he'd put the whole of the mainsail up and we were motor sailing. So briefed me on, here we are. And I looked around. It was glorious. It was definitely this is a 44-foot Vision. This is it's hull 4 out of South Africa. So slightly untested. Still lots of kinks to come out of it. Big sails made by North, big laminate sails and tiny jib, but big mainsail. And mast furling main, which will come into play in a minute. You can shudder as you'd like, KB.
I already like it.
So I briefed on, glorious weather, cool breeze, did my 360s and, checked around, looked great. The storm system, the squalls that we'd been watching behind us were coming, and we knew they were there and just needed to keep faster than them. And as the owner went down, I remember sitting up on the nav station and the breeze turned in about 3 minutes. So what was a fairly innocuous breeze and very, very nice, and we had less than a meter waves out there, did this thing that if you've been out in the ocean, well, you get on the Chesapeake, but you can run. We're out in the ocean, and it did this thing where I went, wow, that wind is warm. Wow, that's come up. And so, I got hot wind over my shoulder and only had enough time to call back down to the owner to say, I need you, come back on deck. I was clipped in and I clipped in and said to him, and he kind of came up and said, what's happening? And I said, we need that down now. Now we're in a 44-foot catamaran and I've got to bring it around into the wind. Oh, did I mention that the autopilot is not working and it has hydraulic steering? So I can't feel anything. All you can do with hydraulic steering is watch this little thing that goes green to red, because I don't know if you've been in one, but you can't, you had a rudder and you could feel it or not feel it, Kelly and Russ. You can't feel anything. So I've got to bring this catamaran around without steering with feel in it, with a massive mainsail up. We yell down, all hands on deck, and thankfully all of the muscle memory got everybody up on deck for everything. But within about 6 minutes from the time I'd come on to the point that we were there, I was in the cockpit area on this catamaran. I could barely see the owner. So we had driving rain coming in so hard, it was hurting my eyeballs. It was hitting me hard. You felt it before, but this was big. That 1 meter sea had turned into 3 meters plus. So what's that, 12 up to 15 feet. And I've got a full mainsail up and I can't really feel or see where we're going. So we turn it around and we try and do it. And of course, as we try to bring this main down onto the in-boom furling, it's got this complicated little trigger thing that you've got to get just right. And it fails.
There we go. Yeah.
So it jams. So there we are, and we're jammed. So as we do it and we come around, of course, the wind hits the sail. We come through, and to run this furler, you've got to run it through a winch, which on a catamaran is high. It's higher than my chest. So we're all sort of working at awkward angles, and the three of us are working hard. And as we turn around, and I'm like, I'm bringing it back around. Everybody hold on. I'm coming to starboard, coming into the wind. We turn around, and the German sheeting main, the No Traveller main sheets hold it in place, and with your 2 clutches, as we came around, I watched, and time stopped still as that port side clutch opened up. So as the clutch opened up, I've now got a full main with a full sail up, hurtling across the boat with my very tall owner standing in front of me. And we've been in a car accident. You've done something before, you know what happens. Time has stopped and it's inevitable and it's coming. And I watched this ginormous boom come across with a ginormous sail and come right across. And so it came across, it hit the shrouds, but that little clutch caught just as it came across. So it didn't hit with the full brunt. We gathered it all in, we turned it around, it was all good. We brought it down, we managed to get ourselves in place and off we rocked. And yeah, I said to Molly in the things when I emailed her, we ate every bit of chocolate on board. Talk about adrenaline. And we are hyped up, we've got the whole thing and we're eating it all. And we're like, oh my God, it's amazing. So I got up the next morning and checked, no damage. There is a slight chafing on the top of the cabin top as we go across. But oh my God, how quickly something can turn from nothing to something, and how quickly gear fails, and how awful that could have been.
So Jane, I have to stop you real quick and just ask. Everybody wants to know, what did Kristen do when the boom came across with shrouds?
Kristen was doing a jig and going, "That's good, guys. I told you that's exactly."
Okay. I want to make sure. I didn't know what he was doing on board when the breeze came up. What was happening?
Yeah.
You know, and Kelly and Russ, I'll ask the same question. When the rudder broke, what did Kristen do? It seems to be following him. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, how close did the boom come to the tall owner's head?
It felt very close, but we did go and check the day after. It was a lot further away than it looked. But you know what? When you've got stuff flailing around, you don't know. And all of a sudden we were all clipped in. We were there, but it was just so fascinating. Kristen, you were nodding while I was talking, and it made me realize it's a great cruising boat. But somebody had to be out of the cockpit area to be able to handle the boat in that procedure, which inherently puts somebody at risk of being under there and all the rest of it. So the next day, that's exactly what we did. We did a lessons learned talk where we talked all the way back through. Everyone was still very head up, and they're like, it was my fault. I should have. And like, no. Here's what we do. So when I'm working with a team like that, that's exactly what I do. Is I walk through. I just want the facts. What did you see? What did you see? And then who's the next person in the story? And we talk through the story to try and figure out, because we were trying to figure out why the boom had come across. Was it, what could we have done? What had happened, and how was it? So look, it was more, we were very conscious of it, mostly because we were probably midpoint. We were 4 days out and 4 days to go to get to Antigua. So had something happened, you know, we would have lost the mast. We would have lost that shroud, and on that rig, we would have lost it. That was a great discussion though, because it led us to say, all right, so if worst had come to worst, what would we have done? And what do you think is the worst thing that would have happened? Actually, losing your mast would not have been the worst thing that would have happened. Well, it would have been somebody going overboard, and then that led to that discussion. It led to the issue, KB, that we were talking about before, which was, it wasn't actually the person going over, it was getting the person back on that was the hardest.
Yeah.
It led to our discussion to who had their AIS flares, who had everything else, and it led to a really good discussion, which was, it's my obligation not to go over because I don't want to put you in the position of having to come and get me. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for you. And so it was a crappy, I've been on lots of boats. I've been in the Tasman. I've been in pretty bad weather, like we probably all have. It was pretty scary for about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
But it was a great discussion afterwards. And
I think that sort of chaos on a boat, especially if everybody comes out of it okay. I mean, I don't want to even think about it if everyone had not come out of it okay, but
yeah,
it should make you a better sailor. If you have the right conversation, it should make you a smarter and better sailor. And that's where, KB, you and I have had this conversation before when we used to do those Start Sailing Now seminars. I recently ran into a man down in Charleston who was thinking of buying a boat. And I said, "Oh, you're a sailor." And he said, "No, it's just a dream I've had." And I said, "So you're just going to buy the boat, huh? Did you think about maybe taking a sailing lesson first? Just to feel like it? Because it's kind of a sport that takes some time to master." It is, and it was funny. He
And
wasn't
you never
listening,
master it.
He didn't even ask me why I know
always
anything
learn.
about
Never master
sailing. It was sort of like.
Molly, you're going to put my people off though. So right now I work a lot with new people that have bought boats, and tonight I was having a chat with a couple that have bought a Sayona down in Fort Lauderdale and very excited, and they're very worried about getting on the boat. And I didn't tell them I was on this because I don't want them to watch this tonight. What do we all know? We all know that it's a lot of sailing is about muscle memory and it's about doing. A lot of what we're all talking about, Kelly and Russ, your stories, and KB and Ray, absolutely. We can all go and do those things and it becomes part of our muscle memory. The only way you can go and get this is to do it. The only way you can do it. And so I always, not that I don't want the stories told at all. I think my message always is something will happen, but the more you do it, the more you've got the ability to know what to do when something happens, and you'll be fine. But you're not going to be fine if you don't go off and go and do it either. So just get out there and go and do it rather than letting any of these stories stop you.
And let more experienced sailors teach you something. That they all have something to teach. Some of them are better at teaching it than others. But
Molly, I know we're a little short on time, but one other thing to add to that is that sailing, all types of sailing, is a sport that is best played in the future. So if you are anticipating what will happen next, you can be prepared to execute when that happens. And right now, if you're a Chesapeake Bay sailor, if you're not Kelly and Russ, living the dream and cruising in Florida, you could be spending a lot of time right now thinking about sailing and thinking about some of these safety issues and things like that. And, if there's something that brings apprehension or you're worried about, right now is the time to visualize what that could be and think through it, talk to other sailors, seek out that experience so that when the season comes around, you're best prepared to go out and have a great time and deal with the inevitable issues. Because as Kelly said, it's a boat. There's going to be something, and think through it now so that when that happens, you can get out of that situation swiftly and safely.
And to add to what KB just said, I think one of the things that we can all do as sailors is not be fearful, because I noticed somebody commented saying that we're scaring them with these stories. Well, the reason we're telling you these stories is so that you realize that when you go out in the water, whether it's just for a day sail or whether you're going across, a significant crossing, as Jane did, one of the things that's always advisable is to always be thinking of what would I do if something went wrong. Don't be complacent. Don't get comfortable. Always thinking, what would I do if the rudder fell off? What would I do if I lost the halyard? And have a plan so that you can react in a more controlled way rather than it being chaotic and panicking.
Exactly.
So you guys, we're way past last call, like they're sweeping the floor here in the virtual bar. So I understand, because Prague is on the call, that KB has an affinity for lightning. We're going to save that for the next 50 happy hour. But anyone in Annapolis, when the next storm rolls through, if you happen to see Ray and KB out on a J105 going, yeehaw, you'll know that they connected and they are coming up with more stories to tell on the Spin Sheet Happy Hour in the future. So thank you guys for coming on the program. You've been awesome guests. So cheers to all of you. If you try to clink your glasses toward where there are people, there you go. Yeah, it's really fun to have you here. And I know you have so many stories to tell, and I hope you guys come back and tell them. Kelly and Russ, I hope you guys sail to some beautiful places together. And Ray, you keep on winning. And Jane, well, just keep enjoying your fun employment.
Thank you.
And that's Sharp's word, by the way. I stole it. I thought that funny.
I've been there more than once. So
Yeah.
again, thanks everybody for being on our show, and of course, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Mount Gay for sponsoring it. Get out there by yourself.
know that.
Keep us in business, and of course, pick up your copy of Spin Sheet. But anyway, till next time. Thanks everybody, and stick around for the party in the green room.
Go win that J70 regatta. Say hi to Casey for us.
Will do.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks for having